So we are going to resume with another speaker who's actually going to talk to us a little bit about success in career. So we have with us live today Rayhan Asat, who is an international specialist attorney at Hughes, Hubbard's, Washington, D.C., and a graduate of Harvard University. Rayhan has extensive experience in Central Asian, Canadian, Turkish, and Chinese law. In 2019, she was announced the president of the American Turkic International Lawyers Association, and since then has been a mentor for Laws Without Walls. How are you, Rayhan?
Hi, how are you? Just give me 1 second. Let me make sure my AirPods is connected. Okay. Can you?
Uh, Sorry, can you say
I
something?
think so.
Oh,
Can
yes,
you hear
I can
me?
hear you now. Yes.
Yeah. Okay, wonderful.
Perfect.
Yeah, I can see a lot of people, like, are people unwilling to share their screen
I guess a lot of
or
people are
camera?
tuning in with the closed cameras. Just, I guess it also makes it easier to use Zoom when you have a lot of people joining. The app becomes a little bit less laggy when people have their cameras turned off. So I think it's better actually.
Okay, and just make sure, can you see me?
Yes, I'm
Okay, wonderful.
hoping we can all see. Uh, so yeah, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. It's been a busy day. I end up working today, so
Oh,
eh,
okay. Well, thank you for joining us anyway.
yeah, it's my pleasure.
Of course. I guess I talked a little bit about your experience, but did you want to elaborate more about, about yourself and your background?
Yeah, sure. So I grew up in northwestern part of China, like in Urumqi, and I spent early childhood there. And in my early 20s, actually, I moved to Toronto. So I spent 4 years uni there, and after I've been just like, I think I call it an exploring my identity journey. So I ended up going to Turkey. I got a wonderful job, and I've always wanted to understand more of the, like, the Uyghur identity as well as our cultural affinity with other Turkic um, cultural groups. So I ended up working at a law firm there, at a British law firm for 3 years. And then I came, but at that point I realized, like, I became so North American that um, it's not like, coming to Turkey, I felt like this is home. I rather felt home more so in North America.
Mm.
And that's when I realized that I got to come back. So I explored graduate education at Harvard. And 2016, I graduated from Harvard Law. And hence, since then, I've been working at an American law firm here in DC as an attorney, but mostly practicing anti-corruption and international investigation. So my job, day-to-day job, involves like dealing with international clients.
Mhm.
And I think just along the way, like when I was in Turkey, I was able to pick up Turkish. So that allowed me to also work on, not just Turkey, but also like Turkic region, because I noticed that there's so much similarities between even Azari language and Turkish language. But if you only speak Uyghur, then there has to be a bridge to understand Azari. But because I speak Turkish and as well as Uyghur, so that allowed me to work on, like, even like, if there's a project in Azerbaijan, I was fascinated the fact that I can read Azari documents.
Wow.
But so basically to say that I think that child experience um, was really transformational in my life, in a sense that, I built some of great connections in Turkey that even today that I can call them up and just talk about life, and I think those meaningful connections were also very much helpful in my career. So yeah, so I think that's in brief, like, I guess, like, I'm somebody who really loves multiculturalism, loves traveling, and different languages, basically.
Nice. Yeah. And how would you say that your passion for, multiculturalism and exploring, other communities, how has that translated into your work as a lawyer?
Well, I think one of the beauties of being an attorney, and even just like in whatever profession you work at. I think the world is so diverse now. I mean, I think Toronto is a great example. Canada is such a melting pot. um, I think it allows you to understand that cross-cultural intricacies that a lot of people, if you grew up in a very homogenous society, that you wouldn't understand. And you're able to connect with people in a way that you make them feel very comfortable too. I don't like this word tolerance per se. And when people say like, oh, we have to tolerate, like it's not about tolerate, but rather understanding and respecting somebody's culture and
Mhm.
language or tradition. So I, I find that when you're somebody who loves different cultures and traveling, you can easily connect with people. And um, trust me, when as you grow into like more adulthood and in your profession, you meet with people who also had similar experience with you. So like sometimes we end up talking about a joke that like somebody had an interesting experience in Turkey or Toronto. You get stranded in some island, like and I think like those things can only happen because you traveled. And sometimes like I just make jokes in Turkish, and like I would explain to them, and they appreciate that. So people appreciate that too. And I think you're also kind of inviting people to appreciate other cultures too.
Mhm.
And just one joke that I love this Turkish saying. I think it's called like kolay gelsin, and but you can never translate right into English. It's like be easy on you, but you say that to everybody. You say it to your coworker. You say if somebody is working or cleaning, you say just like hope like that goes easy on you. So I used to like sign off like when I'm working at firm like colegas, and my colleagues were like, what does it mean, like, right? So I was kind of like also injecting my culture into my work and introducing people to the warmth of our culture too. And I think those things I was able to do that because I traveled so much, and that I think in some ways also allowed me to be more confident,
For sure.
um, and assertive, but also just like very respectful. And like I love introducing people to different cultures.
For sure. And I'm sure it helps as well with what you're doing as a lawyer, just, immersing yourself into all these different cultures and communities. It helps you kind of become more flexible when it comes to dealing with different people, different backgrounds. So that's really
Exactly. And you just never know, like when you're meeting a client, like I remember we had a meeting with a client in Dubai, and like oh, I just said oh salam, or like just like a word like that. And like small things like that can just completely transform how the meeting is going to progress, right? So but I think like most lawyers, especially in American lawyers, like they try to, some, not everybody, like some try to even like prep themselves about a culture before going in, and they
Mhm.
do so out of respect. But I think I do it more genuinely, if it makes sense.
You're actually interested,
Yes,
genuinely curious.
exactly. Yeah.
That's awesome. And I guess going back to the theme of success, what would you define professional success to be, or even just success in your life? What does that mean to you?
So success has been like, I feel like, it had a different meaning in my life at different stages. And
Mhm.
sometimes like I valued perhaps like a publishing an article, or like, just like being recognized. But as I am growing into like more I wouldn't call it seniority, but as I'm trying to understand now, like I feel like I understand the world better. I feel like success is not just about like one aspect of your life. um for instance, like somebody is like so successful in their career, but they forget to cultivate those personal relationships in their lives,
Yeah.
then you could be so successful, but it's not a shared, it's like you're alone. But imagine if, God forbids, but something do happen and you you were like left with nothing, and without those friendships or relationship that you forgo in the first place, you're going to be alone. So I start to appreciate this like a full circle of like cultivating not only your career but also like personal relationships. But but mostly like I am a big believer in like paying it forward. I love like mentoring you know, younger, like whether students or somebody who's like just stepping into their new profession. um so I think like those like meaningful relationships that I've built over the years have become a source of energy and inspiration in so many ways. So for me, like success is like a complex but combination of so many things. It doesn't have to be either or, but rather you know, personal relation with your own loved family.
Mm-hmm.
That's so important for me. Friends. I feel like because I've left home when I was 18, they became extended family for me. So like those personal relationships are incredibly important. But at the same time, just care for the world and try to learn as much as I can,
Mm-hmm.
and just be like an informed citizen, but not just like a domestic citizen, but like a worldly citizen where I actually cared about, you know, what's happening like in Syria or in the Uyghur region or like in Darfur, like you know what I mean. Like so, just be engaging and compassionate. And um, I think often people tend to not focus on those like your internal traits that I think you need to very much pay attention to, because sometimes I think it's very easily be tempted into this world where like, you know, we seek some sort of material comfort, but those don't really bring uh, that kind of assurance that you're seeking in life actually.
Mm-hmm.
So so by and large, I feel like success is truly just trying to be like a better person and be informed citizen, but also like, you know, planting the seeds of friendships and your career, foundational knowledge, and all of that.
Yeah, that's a really good answer. I guess going off of that point about, kind of balancing all these different aspects of what success means to you, like your relationships and yeah, your career and all of that. As youth, I think they struggle a little bit when it comes to balancing all of these different things that come
Mhm.
into play when you're growing up, especially when you're a youth. I think all of these things are so important to you at the same time. So, what advice would you give to people who are looking, to find out how to balance all of that together?
Um, I think it's been also like a struggle for me. I feel like, you know, some parts of my life, I feel like I did overlook or I didn't pay attention to. And, you know, there comes a point in life, I was like, you know, I try to like balance things, like, but I think at each different juncture in your life, like there are things that you had to prioritize. Like for instance, during exam period, you cannot still like keep meeting up with your friends. Like there are things that you need to learn how to like make those sacrifices. But I'm not talking about but it's like be responsible. I remember when I was in Canada, especially like, you know, I studied at York University, and it's kind of like in the middle of nowhere in Toronto, and every Friday the school would take us out for a night out. But there are times that I had to forego that opportunity. Although, like, you know, we do have a absolutely free bus arranged to go to downtown and to have fun, because my priority at that point in life was make sure that my grades are uh, not perfect, but you know, like good. That's something that I could live with. So so I think you need to learn how to prioritize, but at the same time, I'm especially like, you know, um there are things that you still can do, and I rather have more like a meaningful conversations with people rather than just meeting for like extended long hours.
Mhm.
But just keep it short, but make sure you still check in with friends. um but I think when you have the will, but also be like, if you're well organized, I think you can still manage to do it.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't believe in this whole idea of like, oh, like you can have it all, like, you know, everything is balanced, because it's almost impossible.
Yeah.
um, because I think at some point in your life, one aspect of your life is going to be great, but at some other points in your life, the other aspects are going to be great. But one thing I think one needs to make sure is that if you like, say that there's like a friendships and personal relationships, if you don't have, like, you know, a significant other that you could rely on, but make sure at least you have friends. But because I think that is for me a good balance, because you could still have somebody you could confide into if you're facing like adversity in life. um so yeah, I think that would be my own like observations, just going through life like over the past few years, and just working at a law firm,
Mm-hmm.
which is a very fast paced environment in itself.
Course. And I guess talking more about what you do right now as a career, as a lawyer, what is your goal with that? Like, what has been your drive or your passion when you've went into law?
I think like most lawyers, I went to law school to pursue, like, you know, justice. Like I wanted to become a human rights lawyer. I want to change the world for the better. But once, like, you know, the reality hits, is like you have this huge student loans, and I end up going into like a corporate world. And that happens very often for a lot of law students. But but I stayed true to my core, or my belief. I've always believed that I want to help people, right? So even though I'm working as an attorney at a law firm, I made sure that I do like enough pro bono work, that I'm still helping people. Like, I represent a minor in an asylum case before the immigration court in the US. So because those little things and doing those things that I was passionate about
Mm-hmm.
previously allowed me to better understand what I want. Like, do I want to stay in corporate world? Like, or I may be interested in doing like human rights related work in the future. So despite I made some compromise, in a sense that I choose corporate world over why I did pursue law in the first place, I think I still stayed or remained true to my core belief, which is to help people, which is to make the world a better place. And to give you one great example is that when I was working in Turkey, I helped to build a foundation, a nonprofit that is committed to help the displaced Syrians.
Okay.
Now, this work is interesting because I think it's an extremely worthy cause. So I was so happy to help them, and now like they are just endorsed by the UN just a few years ago. And just like it keeps like I'm still connected to the organization in some ways, because even this year, like, you know, I was coaching the Law Without Walls, this competition that you mentioned earlier. So one of the things we looked at was how could we make sure the nonprofits can get like a funding in a transparent manner. So
Mm-hmm.
we end up looking at my like the organization that I helped to examine and find like what is the best approach. So, you know, it's just like those little seeds, if you will, that I planted. It just somehow, it's just like life is becoming and coming in full circle, that in ways that I can't explain.
Yeah, that's amazing. It's amazing to hear that. And I think like what I'm taking from what you were saying is that um, even if your career doesn't necessarily end up where you wanted it to be, there are always other opportunities out there for you to kind of achieve your previous goals. Like you're saying, you wanted to help people, and that came out in different ways, even if it didn't necessarily come out in the specific role you're in right now. So that's
Exactly.
amazing to hear. I
Yeah.
guess another question I have is because this conference is mostly focused on the youth and how
Hmm.
youth are slowly going to be getting into these roles that we're in right now, what advice would you give, or what would you say are some qualities that you think makes a person successful in maybe your specific role or in general in a specific any role?
So what, like, I'm a big believer in traveling.
Yeah.
Um, but I don't say like, okay, it's great if you can travel and, expose to like as many cultures as possible. But I also believe in living like, somewhere outside of your comfort zone for a year or two, just to have some sort of find some like it's in Europe they call it Erasmus students program, or some sort of a cultural exchange program. And the greatest benefit of that is, I think, especially if you don't speak the language of that foreign country, and when you try to learn and engage with people, I think it's a humbling experience, because suddenly you're not the, because if you're in Canada and you speak English, you're absolutely fine. Like, you never had that difficulty, you never had to make the effort to communicate and convey your message. So oftentimes, like, people expect everybody to speak English because that should be the standard language. But when you're in a foreign country and when you have those moments, you basically become like a child trying to just talk to somebody, to communicate like what you want, right? So I think those are incredibly humbling experience that teach you to be a better person. And because then if you come back and later, like, if you meet somebody who could be just like a trying to find their way in the street of Toronto, I think you learn how to deal with them in a manner that is so respectful. And I think that experience in itself made me a better communicator at work. I built better relationship with my colleagues. Um, and just like I learned how, I think because communication is incredibly important, whatever you do in your career, at your school, and even if you're like, giving a public speech like this. So I think traveling freely and traveling and plus learning a new language, I think those things are incredibly important to define one's character and build your integrity. So that is my personal experience. And I'm not trying to pretend that I'm perfect, so but because I still make these mistakes and very quite often. I think we're so much consumed by this popular culture, and like all this Netflix platform, like there's so many of them, like Amazon, like video stream, and all of these platforms are at our fingertips right now. And it's so easy to be consumed by those. Like, I spend hours just like watch like popular shows. But I think we're becoming, um I regret to say that, and this is not just like in America, but worldwide. We're not seeking out knowledge. We're not like reading as we used to. I think we have developed such a short attention span. So people end up like, we could watch like several hours TV, but people just don't have the time and energy and attention to read like an entire book. And I think as the technology bring us so closer, but it's also creating this disconnect between not just the human beings, but our desire to pursue knowledge and really develop critical thinking. Because when you read books, whether it's about history, you get to question a lot of things. And I think I read more now than in my like early 20s, and I wish I've done that. Like, I think that's something that, in life I said, oh, I regret not reading enough books. But not just reading books about something that I'm interested, but also about like personal development, any subjects. um And then I think interactions with people who are different than you. And I think a lot of people say, like, engage with people like-minded people. I think that's a word people use very often. But I'm not somebody who just talk to people who think like me, because I feel like otherwise I'm repeating myself. And if I'm talking to it, if your audience today are mostly Uyghurs, or I see like names represent so many different cultures. I think what I see in a lot of people is one mistake. People tend to just hang out with their own crowd. Like you kind of like define your own crowd. Like I've seen it in Canada so much. The Uyghur community would only hang out with themselves,
Mm.
or like like I've seen the Chinese community does it even more so. And then like Turkish community, they just like, because it's comfortable.
Comfortable.
People don't like being uncomfortable. You need to learn to be uncomfortable, because guess what? I think life puts you in a lot of uncomfortable positions where you have to navigate those challenges. So my advice is to like seek out friendships with people that you may not even speak the language, or completely different than your culture, and just learn about it, because I think those interactions, human interactions, is an incredibly beautiful thing that
Mhm.
makes you a better person. And I think that's something that I start to like appreciate now more than ever.
Wow, that was an amazing answer to a very heavy loaded question. So thank you so much once again, Rayhan, for joining us today. We had, I think, so much great insight from all of your experiences with work and with travel, and I'm sure that our audience was able to learn a few things from you as well. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, and but if I'm happy to like take a question or so, if people wants to ask me questions, unless your time is very much constrained.
Yeah, I'll see. I think we have time for maybe one question, but we are running a little bit late with our conference today. Let's see if anybody wants to raise their hand for a question. But if not, then like we'd love to even like host you in the future, because Dharma Foundation does work on weekly IG like Instagram live sessions, and that way you
Hmm.
can get a little bit more intimate with a person in discussion. So we'll
I
definitely
would love
talk to
to.
you in the future about that.
I would love to. And thank you so much for having me. And this is an incredibly great platform to keep everybody informed. And I hope everybody stays safe and well.
Yeah, hopefully you too.
All
Thank you
right. Okay.
again.
Bye
Take
for
care.
now.
Goodbye.